Hi everyone, I'm Carly Hall from Apartment 413 and I am so excited to teach a 1-hour class on how to epoxy or resin your mugs. So we're starting with this basic mug. I purchased this one at Walmart. It's an Ozark brand mug. I think it was like $6 or $7, although they're always on sale, so check your sales. And we're going to turn it into this masterpiece. I'm so excited to show you basically from the beginning to the end. So we have a lot to go through in an hour, so I'm going to get started right away. So starting with your mug, we have it here. If you take some alcohol, so I just have some rubbing alcohol and a paper towel, we're going to clean our mug off. So you can ditch the lid, and then we're going to start cleaning it. So I took off the label and did some Goo Be Gone on there to get all the stick off. So now I'm just going to put some rubbing alcohol all over my paper towel and really just clean off any residue that's on there. You'll notice on my craft space I have a self-healing mat over my table. Don't use something that you are not okay with damaging. You'll see that I have glue and glitter all over this and we're going to be working with epoxy, so it's going to get messy. So you can see that everything is all wiped off, right? Wipe off inside the lid or the rim of the cup, and you're good to go. Now, you just clear some space off. We're going to be working with glitter. So if you're not a glitter fan, then this project might not be the project for you. So I like to start with a piece of cardstock underneath my workspace because I'm going to be dumping glitter. They also have these really cute glitter trays that have a little plug so you can collect your glitter. I try to use this, but with bigger projects like this, I usually use a large piece of cardstock like this yellow piece here. So for this part, we're gonna need, you have your rubbing alcohol, your mug, your glitter. You'll also need some Mod Podge. I just have the matte kind. Then we'll have our foam brush and a cup to pour it all in. I like to use a little cup like that because that way I can mix my Mod Podge, cover it with a piece of saran wrap, and then come back for my second coat. So we'll pour our Mod Podge. Pour a generous amount because you want to make sure that you have enough for your project. You're going to be doing 2 coats, so I like to pour enough for 2 coats. That might be a little weak, but we can always refill that in a second. Then I'm going to take my cup, and I like to use a pool noodle for this step. So you can put a pool noodle in it, and then that way you have kind of a grip to work with, so you're not holding your cup. Some people like to put a PVC pipe in that cup as well. The pool noodle works great for me. So after your alcohol has dried and everything is smooth and clear, you're going to be pretty heavy-handed with your Mod Podge. So I just like to brush it on really thick and make sure to get all the way up to the top, really in that seam there on the bottom, and it's going to dry kind of quickly, so don't be afraid to put a lot on. So just work your way all the way around the cup. Now if you're a beginner, I do recommend working with epoxy a couple times before you tackle these mugs, because epoxy and resin are their own type of beast, and you really want to understand the principles of mixing and measuring before you jump into a project like this where you're investing a couple of days. So this project from start to finish will take you about 36 hours in dry time. So you're not working that whole time, but you will be investing a lot of your time. So you want to make sure that you know what you're doing and set yourself up for success. My first mug, I will be 100% honest with you, I failed. So, and I've worked with resin a lot. So again, just really covering. You're going to do 2 coats, so you don't have to be a perfectionist on this step, but again, just kind of flipping it over, making sure it's all on there. The bottom will dry the fastest, so we'll pour that first. You can set your Mod Podge to the side, and then you're going to hold up your mug and just start dumping. Don't be afraid to have it fall off and kind of work quickly. Again, this isn't a time to be a perfectionist because we will do a second coat. and you can see that I'm just pouring it right on top of my fingers, you will make a mess. So do this in a place where you're okay tracking glitter everywhere. Turn your little pool needle. This is where the pool needle comes in handy. And if you miss any spots, we'll get those on the second round. So you can do a little once over, turn it all the way around, make sure you got all the spots. Pay attention to the bottom. Do a little bit there. And then you'll just set this off to the side. Get a little bit more. And then you'll just set this off to the side. Oops. I touched the top of that, so I'm going to just pour right back on there. The way that I put these on the table, I want you to see this because I put it down on the edge of my table and then I work my way kind of sliding it up and over like this. Okay, so now you have a glitter mess. You're going to pour this back into your container because who wants to waste glitter? So you're just going to take him, fold it like a taco, and pour that right in. So not too bad. If you're a glitter phobe like me, I do have a lint roller. This is one of my favorite tools. So you can ditch your piece of paper and then you can roll your workspace, roll your hands, get all your glitter off before you move on to the next step. So if you're a glitter phobe like me, invest in a little glitter cleanup. You'll thank me later. Okay, let's go back and we're gonna clean off our hands, make sure all of our glitter's off. So after our glitter cup, so our glitter cup here, it is, here we go. So we have our glitter cup. This will need to sit and dry for about 2 hours. So if it has holes or imperfection, don't feel like you have to fix it because you're going to be able to come back and touch it up on your second glittering. So he'll dry. Now time lapse really quickly. Here's our dried mug. So we have our dried mug. And the fun part about the dry mug is this only has one coat of Mod Podge. And once it dries, I like to just drop it on my table, kind of like this, and get all the loose glitter off. Then we're gonna do the same thing. So we're gonna take another coat of glitter and coat it, okay? So I wanted to show you this because I think it's really important to see that you can put glitter on top of glitter. So I did clean up my station, but don't worry, we're gonna do this again with a second coat. So we have our Mod Podge and our mug that already has glitter on it, and we're essentially doing the exact same thing, but I just again wanted to show you how to put the Mod Podge on top of the glitter coat. So your glitter may brush off a little bit, and you'll see it's kind of on my paintbrush there, but no worries, that is okay because we're actually gonna seal the glitter in with the epoxy. I'm using Art Resin brand, and the reason that I'll be using Art Resin is because it is a food safe resin or epoxy. And when you're putting your mouth on something, I'd rather be safe than sorry. There's a lot of less expensive resins and epoxies on the market. But again, if you're putting your mouth on it or it's coming in contact with your drinks or your food, splurge a little bit and get the food safe, in my opinion. So again, just kind of turning, working around. Now that I've done this several times, I do feel like it's very therapeutic. In the beginning, I was getting a little frustrated because I didn't know how to grip it, and placing it down was my Achilles heel. Trying to figure out a way to put it down without damaging it. So now we're gonna do the same thing. I have done several mugs with this container of glitter, and I feel like surprisingly the glitter goes a long way. So you can be pretty generous and get a lot of cups out of one thing of glitter. And this is just Recollections, and I think I got it at Michael's. I love this color. Pink's my favorite color, even though I only wear black. So there's that. And you can see that I can move pretty quickly on these. So again, the way that I place it down is kind of like this, and then sliding it to wherever I need it to be on the table. So we're gonna do the same thing where we take our glitter dump it off your hands as best as you can. Normally, I would be washing my hands between all these steps because I want to make sure that when I go to do my resin, that my area is glitter free. So again, you can see that there's a little bit of glitter everywhere. We're done with the glitter up to this point, so we can ditch our glitter and clean our workspace. So I'm just going to wipe down my glitter area, and if you're being super conservative, you can save all this glitter too and dump it into your container. Okay, so we are good there. Now, this cup right here would sit overnight. So this is a critical step. The first time I made a mug, I was so excited. I covered it in Mod Podge. I was so generous with how much I applied because I wanted to make sure that that glitter was gonna stick. Well, trouble is, Mod Podge takes a while to dry, and if you try to put epoxy over it, it's gonna trap in that moisture, and the epoxy is not going to cure properly, and it's just gonna peel off. So, since we're doing this kind of quick video style, we're not gonna wait for this to cure overnight, and we're gonna apply the epoxy next. But don't do that. Make sure that you leave this, set it overnight, and come back to it the next day. Okay, let's learn how to mix our epoxy. With everything that I've done wrong in the past, I'll teach you my tips and tricks so that you know what not to do. Okay, so we have our scale. We have a mixing cup. If you don't have a scale, you're going to want to purchase mixing cups that actually have little lines on them so that you know exactly where to measure to. Since I have a scale, we're gonna do that. You're also going to need some type of stir and gloves. Even though this resin is food safe, you wanna protect your skin. So any type of gloves will work here. And then of course, you'll need your resin. So we have the resin and the hardener. All right, get your gloves on. For these cups, I have been mixing about 15 milliliters of both the resin and then additional 15 with the hardener. So you'll turn on your scale. This is just a food scale, and it's set to milliliters right now. I'll put my cup on and tear it out. And then we're gonna pour our resin in first and then the hardener. So in the cap of these little guys, there's a little stopper. We'll just pop the stopper off and put it inside your cap so that it doesn't get glitter on it. And then pour slow. When you first start pouring, you just want to make sure that you can see the rate that you're pouring. I'm already at 3 milliliters, and we only want to get to 15. If you're under or over, that's okay. You just pour 1 part resin, 1 part hardener. So we're at 6. Keep on going. And all the way to 15. Almost there. This is the tricky part because you don't want to over pour, but it's going to change really fast. There we go. So I just wipe it off right on the top. I just remembered as I was pouring though, we're not going to epoxy this one. I'm going to skip this step, and we're gonna have one that's already epoxied because I wanna epoxy the last one. So hold with me for a second. So we poured our resin, and we can let this resin sit by itself. We can't pour the hardener because that'll start the mixing process. So I'm actually gonna pretend that I mixed the resin and then did this step. And the reason is because we actually have to pour epoxy and do this again. So I'm gonna skip this step and come back to it. So sorry about that. We're gonna back this up a little bit. Okay, so we've mixed the epoxy. Imagine we just did all those steps and then we poured it. Then you're gonna let it dry overnight again. So now we're on day 3. So you had glitter day 1, overnight, let that dry. Day 2, you epoxied it, and then you came back to it, and now you're ready to sand. Okay, so we're gonna sand this down. It's cured for over 12 hours. I wanna point that out. Do not rush this. If you try to sand this before 12 hours, it'll be wet and then it'll ball up and will not be a pleasant experience. So this is automotive sandpaper. Let me just get the packaging for you. it looks like this. And the great part about this is you can do a wet sand with it. I've been doing dry sands, but you can use it wet and it'll work great. So we're gonna take the sandpaper, and you can hold the mug on your hand. You can use a pool noodle if that's easier for you, but you're just gonna take off the shiny finish. And don't worry, it's going to look dull, but that's okay. This part is so that you can get all of the glitter bumps off, all of the bumps off the epoxy, and then your decal will go on super smooth. Again, you don't have to be a perfectionist in these spots. The place where I will tell you be a little bit more of a perfectionist is when you're actually using the turner and applying your epoxy. Just pay attention to all your shiny spots. You just want to make sure that you get all of the shine off. So you can see it's pretty dull on this side now. Do the same to the back. You want to rough up the surface so that the next coat of epoxy will really stick. Do the bottom. And I tore this piece in half. You can use as many pieces as you need. And just sand until it all feels even and smooth. So just like you were working with wood or another material that you need to smooth out, I feel like your hands are the best judge in terms of if it's all sanded out. And we're gonna wipe it clean, and then when we wipe it clean, we'll see if there's any other shiny spots that we missed, and we'll go over and hit those. Really make sure to get the rim, make that really even. And again, like I said, I'll go over pouring the epoxy in the next little bit. I just wanted to make sure that we only have one cup with epoxy on it, so we're not dripping everywhere, since I only have one turner. Okay, so we have it all sanded out. And then what I would do normally is I would take this to the sink and just run it under water. But since I don't have a sink here, I'm just gonna do the same thing with alcohol again. So I'm gonna take the alcohol and just wipe it clean. Make sure to get inside the cup so that all your sanding particles are off. Clean the table off while we're at it. And then place this down. Just make sure you don't miss any spots. So if you compare this mug that was just sanded, we'll give it a second to dry back up, compared to how shiny this is, you can see that we just took that shiny finish right off. So that's what you want your mug to look like at this stage. So again, this has been glittered, Mod Podge glittered, Mod Podge glittered. So 2 coats of Mod Podge and glitter. And then it dried for 12 hours. Then we epoxied it. It was on the turner. I'll explain the turner in a second. And then that hardened for 12 hours. Then you can sand it. So now we're at the sanding stage. Let me just wipe that bottom off just a little bit more. So if you don't have a Cricut, you can purchase vinyl decals at different places, but I love my Cricut and I love what it can do. This is an image from Maker's Gonna Learn, and it is so cute. We'll see it on the mug in a second. So on this cup, I placed my decal. You can see it here. I don't know if you can tell, but do you remember the little Ozark logo? the Ozark logo is actually right here, and that really bothers me. So it's really hard to tell where it is because your glitter is covering it up. But the one tip that I can give is to try to find it and then place it where the logo is not. So if you can see it, great. If not, like if it's this hard to find, I feel like you're fine. But really looking in light and trying to determine where, I think mine's right here, but I could be wrong. So I'm just gonna look to see if I can find it. And this side looks good to me. So we're gonna put it this way. And I'll use my scissors to kind of hold that there. Okay, so we have our decal, and this is kind of a little craft lesson. Actually, I need my scissors, so we'll use this. So I like to take my decal and trim it as close to the words as possible, so that when I place it, I know exactly what I'm doing. So we'll just trim around. And again, I just used my Cricut, and I cut regular premium vinyl, and then also used an adhesive foil for the scissors. Now, I like to do a thing called the hinge method. And so I like to cut a piece of tape that's longer than my decal, tape it the length of my decal, and then this is where I'll place it, right on my mug. So you can measure it and actually use a ruler, or you can use your finger method to measure, whatever you prefer. And then just tape it down when you've got it in the perfect location. So I just like to place it, make sure that it looks good to me. It looks good to me, so I'm gonna start placing. The way that you do this is you take one side, bend it back, and then you pull the liner off your design, just like this. Now when your liner's off, take your scissors and just cut it right down that side. And then carefully push your design in. Since it's a curve, I kind of like to work it and snip different areas down so that I can really press in and not get any little bubblies. Just make sure you don't snip your actual design. And then really work it down, especially your foil. On my first one with my foil, it kind of bubbled up a little bit, so really press it in. Make sure that glue is really hitting your surface. Then you can take your piece of tape off and just make sure you don't do what I just did and pull the transfer tape off. And then peel it off and you can toss that away. Now we're gonna burnish that down and we're gonna do the exact same thing on the other side. So we're gonna flip, peel back. Again, this is not a clean hands project. You can see how gross my hands are already getting. I will put gloves on for the next part, but it's not something where you want to get a manicure and then do this the next day. With rubbing alcohol and epoxy, your manicure will be ruined. That's why I don't have any nail polish on, because my manicure was ruined. Now we're going to snip these again. And little baby scissors work perfect for this, because then you can push each little part down. And then I just like to snip just a little bit and then work in. Slow and steady wins the race on this one, because you want to make sure that your decal is placed. You just worked so hard on your design, or sorry, your cup. You want to make sure that your design is stuck. There's a little bubble in my H, so make sure that you pay attention to anything that you might want to lift up and place down again before you move on to peeling it off and putting your epoxy on. So now you can use a scraper tool, your finger, a popsicle stick, whatever you have available, and really just burnish that in. The white doesn't typically have an issue sticking because it is permanent, but again, the adhesive foil is a little bit trickier. But it's so pretty, I feel like it's worth it. So then you're gonna take, if you have nails, it's great for this. You're gonna kind of just pick up one of your corners. And since I snipped my transfer tape, I may have to work this off in a couple sections. So we're just gonna peel this back and up and off, and just make sure that you're getting all of the transfer tape off. So if you miss any pieces, just come back through and get that off. Okay. So it's not too bad right now. I feel like this You can see this project is definitely doable. You just want to make sure that you set aside some time to do it. But I feel like this part that we're getting to is the most fun in terms of working with resin. And then make sure you don't lose your dots of your eyes. Peel off every last bit of tape. I burnished a little too well, I think, because my transfer tape is having a little bit harder time releasing. Okay, so there we go. We have everything up and off. My H, if that really bothered me, I can push it in a little bit. So I'm just going to use my nail and push my H in so it's really stuck on there so it doesn't bubble up while I'm epoxying. Okay, so our decal is on. We are ready to get to the next step. You guys, I'm a little bit sweaty. It's been a process in here. So before we jump into epoxying, the things you need to know. I had already started measuring out, so I had already put my resin step in, but we're gonna add our hardener next so that we can mix the resin and it'll start curing. The second you start mixing together, it will start activating. It's basically a chemical reaction that's gonna harden. So if you're not ready to work with your resin, don't put your hardener in. But if you're ready to start mixing and you're gonna start applying, then we're good to go. So before I mix, I'm just gonna rearrange a couple of things so that we're ready to go. We will be using a turner. If you don't have a turner, you can still do this project. You do not need a turner, but you will need patience if you don't have a turner, because the turner, this guy, will turn my mug for me so I don't have to sit and turn it over and over. So we're not there yet. We still need to mix our mix the good stuff, but I'm going to set this off and we'll get to that in just 1 second. So coming back overhead, we're going to finish our mixing process. So we had our scale all teared out, but remember that we already have our liquid in and there's 15 milliliters already in there. So we're just going to add 15 milliliters of hardener. So let me get my gloves back on. And again, when you're working on your project, make sure that you don't have any type of glitter or anything on your gloves, because this is your final coat. So when I put this on, I want my fingers to be clean because I'm going to be spreading a clear coat over. And if there's glitter on my gloves, like in this case, the glitter will get into the clear coat. And this top coat, it might have glitter over the letters and things like that. If you don't mind, then that's great. But between each step, before I epoxy and mix and everything, I like to clean my workspace off so that that's not an issue. Okay, so we already put the resin in. There's 15 milliliters there. We're gonna put the hardener in. So same thing, cap off, little stop off as well. And then we're gonna pour 15 milliliters. Now this part pouring matters a little bit more because we need it to be exactly the same. So if I accidentally over pour, that's okay if I pour to 16, but I will need to pour another milliliter in there. So not to stress you out, but it is a little bit stressful. And the reason that the mixture is so important to be 1-to-1 is because if it's not 1-to-1, it won't cure all the way. It does take like a full 72 hours, I think, to cure fully. But if you don't mix it exactly even, it'll never harden all the way. Moment of truth. Ooh, that was a lot. Okay, so we'll stop it there. You guys, under pressure, got it. So 15 milliliters there. So now we have 30 milliliters total of liquid. We can ditch the scale out. And then this part, you'll want to set a timer. So I pull my phone out. I'm gonna set a timer for 3 minutes so that I know how long to mix for. And then you'll see that there's kind of 2 layers in here, and we're just gonna mix those together. Some people like to mix super slow. I'm not one of those people. I like to mix super fast. So If you are a slow mixer, that is totally fine. A lot of people like to mix slow because they get less bubbles in there. If you like less bubbles, then that's great. But I don't care about the bubbles because we're gonna blow them out anyways. So I like to just be aggressive. Take your popsicle stick and really run it along the edge and the bottom, because you just want to make sure that the two components are making a little family and mixing perfectly together. Okay, really mix those guys together. And 3 minutes will feel like an eternity, to be honest. Like, I will look at the clock like several times. I feel like it's as bad as a microwave minute, where you're like, well, not a microwave minute. I don't know. Something that takes a really long time, maybe a microwave minute. But I feel like when I'm mixing epoxy, your wrist gets sore, and maybe I just have weak wrists, but I will mix and then I'll have to switch hands. And you can over mix. You can mix longer than 3 minutes, but definitely don't mix less than 3 minutes. Let's see how we're doing here. Okay, so it's only been one, well, maybe two. And you can see that I've created a ton of bubbles. So just mix away. Don't skimp on mixing. I know that I said it takes a really long time, but it is worth it, because again, just like even if you spend all that time measuring out, turn my scale off. If you don't mix the components together completely, you'll still get those soft spots. And again, make sure that you're wearing gloves, because this is a chemical reaction that's happening, and epoxy gets hot. When it's curing, it heats up. So, oh, and do notice I am mixing in a disposable cup. Epoxy is a pain to get off things. It's a pain to clean up, so mix in things that you can just toss right in the trash. So this is just a little party cup. I do like to mix in clear things because epoxy does seem to take the color off things. So like if you're mixing in a colored cup, some of the ink could mix in there. So I prefer clear cups, wooden popsicle sticks to mix, and I've had no issues mixing. 30 milliliters is a little bit more than you need for this project for each coat, but it has worked great for me, because if you mess up just a bit, you can come in and fix your mistakes. Okay, so I think it's been 3 minutes. Okay, we're good to go. Yep, 3 minutes. So the next step that we're gonna do, we have our cup with our vinyl decal. Let's see, I think a close-in view would be the best for this one, so we can get in and see just what we're doing here. Okay, so we have our cup. Now this turner, if you're interested in building your own turner, there are so many websites out there about turners. So I'm gonna talk all about this while we're putting the epoxy on. I like to use smaller pool noodles so that my cup fits snugly on them. So I put a piece of bubble wrap on the bottom, and then I place my cup on the turner, and then I actually have recently begun taking a little other piece of bubble wrap and just kind of shoving it down in there as well. You just don't want your cup to be loose. So you want your cup to be really snug on there so that when it turns, it doesn't shift off. Okay, so like I mentioned, your epoxy is already curing. So you have about 45 minutes to work with it. I don't actually think you have that long, but that's what they tell you. So I like to start pouring as fast as I can. This process will kind of take a while, but what you're gonna do, your mug's on there, and you're gonna take your cup and start pouring. When you pour epoxy, it kind of drips down the cup and slides off. So we're gonna hand turn it, kind of just like this, while we're working, so that it doesn't drip. Then we'll power on the epoxy turner to let it dry. So let's get started. I don't mind my turner getting dripped with epoxy, but if you do, place a piece of wax paper or something on top and that'll protect it. So again, make sure, like if you want to switch your gloves out and you want clean gloves so you don't have any glitter in them, do that before you get started. As a reminder, this mug has, again, 1 coat of Mod Podge glitter, dry for an hour. Another coat of Mod Podge glitter, dry for at least 12 hours. Next day, 1 coat of epoxy, dry for 12 hours, sanded, the decal's on now. So we're about 2 days in, we're on day 3, and we're gonna seal it with its last coat of epoxy. So here we go. You're gonna take this, and you're just going to kind of beat it on just a bit. When you're first starting off, start small. When I'm not working on a self-healing mat, I actually like to put a lid underneath, like a Rubbermaid lid. And again, I told you my gloves were not clean, so you can see that the glitter kind of goes over the white letters. So that's kind of the importance of making sure you're wearing clean gloves when you're doing this and having a clean workspace. So if the glitter doesn't bug you, then no problem, but it kind of bugs me. So I like to work with clean gloves. So you can see that I'm kind of just smoothing it out with my finger. I do like to get the bottom first. That way it kind of drips over the bottom, and then I kind of just rub it in circular motions. And I really like to get the edges so that all my glitter is really sealed in. This is a second coat of epoxy, so I can't feel any of the glitter, but I know it's there peeking out, so I just want to make sure that it gets in. Come on this side, do the same thing, and you can see that it starts running right away. While it is thick, it does run pretty quickly. And you can see the gloss is just coming right back. So even though we sanded it, it gets glossy pretty quick. The other tip when I got started with mugs, other than not letting my Mod Podge dry for the full amount of time and having my cup fall apart, is I didn't know that you're actually supposed to, or some people prefer to, take your epoxy and actually go up and over the lip right here and let it drip in there. I know that seems counterintuitive because you don't want epoxy in the inside of your cup, but we're actually gonna cut that out, and I'll show you how to do that as well. So again, just working your way all the way around. Your gloves will be covered in epoxy, so just be aware that this, again, is a very messy project. And if it drips and gets a little bit thick, don't worry, that's what our turner's for. Oh, so I said I was gonna talk about the turner. So the turner actually, I feel like, is easier to build than it is to make one of these cups. I just followed a YouTube video, and I'm hoping to get a blog post up about how to actually make these. But I just purchased a motor on Amazon and a lamp cord, and then really the rest is just built up with regular wood and PVC pipe, and of course a pool noodle. So if you live in a place like Utah where pool noodles are hard to come by when it's fall, make sure you pick them up when they clearance them going into the summer. And you can see that I have lots of little pool noodle holders that I also use, so I have a couple pool noodles. Okay, so it looks like I have it all the way around, and it's already starting to drip, but that's okay. I just want to make sure I get it along the rim of the cup as well, so that it drips in there. So I just like to kind of pour it along, and I'm very heavy-handed with this part. So it'll just drip in, and then I just like to run my finger up and over all of the rim. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to take one of my gloves off, plug my turner in, and then that's going to start turning. I left one of my gloves on because I'm still going to be smoothing it out, and the reason is because I have my embossing gun. So my embossing gun is just a heat gun, and I'm just going to run it over the top of the cup back and forth so that I can pop any air bubbles, smooth out anything that I missed. And the main part is to work in an area with light, so I have a lot of light reflecting down onto the cup, so I can see like there's 2 bubbles right there and a couple bubbles there. The better light source that you have to work in, the easier it is to spot all of your errors. So you're just going to power this on and just pop all the bubbles. Just going back and forth. Be careful not to heat up your surface because you don't want it to get too hot. If you get too hot and it starts to actually burn and catch it where it kind of sizzles and almost burns your surface. So you don't want that to happen. So that looks good to me while it's turning. It looks like I have it over the rim. There's a couple areas where the epoxy could go up and over a little bit more. So I'm going to take my hand with my glove, dip my finger in the epoxy, and just run my finger along the top, which will mean that I have to get out the bubbles again. But I just feel like it's not all the way over the top. And the importance of getting it up and over the top is so that the glitter is 100% sealed in. So we'll just make sure that I can see the epoxy on all the surface. I'm going to take my gloves off because I'm confident that's where I want it. And I'm just going to hit it with the heat gun one last time. Okay, so now that's turning, and it will sit there and turn for about 6 hours. I would say the soonest I've turned my turner off is after it's sat and turned for 6 hours, because then it won't drip anymore. If I turn this off right now, the epoxy will actually go to one side and drip. I mentioned that I'll tell you about some options in terms of not having a turner if you don't want to build your own turner. I've seen a lot on the internet where people will actually take pool noodles. They'll have 2 noodles on each side and a dowel down the middle. And what they'll do is they'll have 2 cups, so 1 cup on each side, kind of like this. And then it'll sit on the cup, and then they just come back, and every 2 minutes or so while it's drying, they just rotate it. That seemed like a lot of work to me, so I didn't want to do that. So that's why I built this turner. This turner, it cost me about $25 to make. Most of the cost was in the motor and the lamp cord. The motor was, I think, $5 and the cord was $3, so that was $8 of the cost. Lumber, depending on where you get it, is cheap, and then the glue and the PVC were the other cost, so it might have been even less. Really, my time was probably the most. So now we have this turning. That'll take about 12 hours to dry to where you can touch it. This one's been drying for 12 hours and it's still a little sticky. So it's not completely done for at least 72 hours. So if you were selling these or making these to give away, keep them after they're at this point for 72 hours. But before you rush off and sell them, inside your cup, you just put all that epoxy inside of it. So I don't know if we want to look overhead or if it's good, better close in. Let me get my knife. Where did I put my knife? There it is. So on the top of your cup, you pushed over the epoxy so that it all the way came out. I already started working on this cup because I forgot that I was going to show you guys. But inside the rim of the cup, there was this thick epoxy ring like this. That's what we're going to teach you how to cut out next. So we're going to take our knife. I have a Cricut True Control knife in my favorite color, pink, obviously. And you're just going to take it and you're just going to run it along the edge just like this and work all the way around. And you just work your way around, kind of slicing off the epoxy so that it doesn't come in contact with your drink, and instead your lid will sit right on top of it. But notice that my glitter is all the way up to the edge. So I'm not cutting off the top of that, I'm just cutting off the inside layer. So you can be as detail oriented as you want. This mug is just for personal use, so you don't have to worry as much. But you can kind of just spin it around, cut it all off. And then for this thicker part that was inside, what you do, you can see that there's a little residue there, but you would cut right through, just like this. So imagine this was here. You would cut right through that, and then kind of shove your knife down underneath like this, and then pop it up and peel it off. So mine came off in a couple pieces, but most of it will come off. Now there's still epoxy in this cup, but don't worry. When I first did my first cup, I was really sad because I thought it all was lost because there was epoxy inside. But that's okay. We're gonna take our alcohol again. Alcohol seems to solve all of our problems in this project. And we're just gonna pour, again, a hefty amount onto our paper towel and then just stick it inside. And then this, I did it while I was watching a TV show, but you kind of just work on the same spot over and over. There are some people that I've watched that will scrape out all of the epoxy, but what I like to do is soften it up to where I can just get my fingernail in there and then scrape it with my fingernail. I don't like using a knife to scrape in here because I don't want to damage my cup. So you really just hold it on there and soften it up. The epoxy will begin to soften. You can just work your way around, soften. And I had way more epoxy in my first cup, and I just sat during a TV show and worked my way around until it was soft. And then I'll show you on a piece once I feel it softening up. So just clean in there. You can see all of the epoxy particles coming out. But then it gets super soft, and you can actually take your fingernail and scrape it, or if you don't want to use your nail, just a straight edge or something of that sort. But it starts just flaking off. So again, some people like to use their knife, and you can come in and just scrape it with your knife. I'm in the camp of using your fingernail and just scraping. So again, I spent about 20 minutes kind of just going back and forth and softening. Some people tape off the top of their cups. The only reason I don't do that is because when I taped off my first cup, I didn't know how long you were supposed to wait to let it dry, and so I ended up pulling off my tape, and then all of my epoxy came with it. So after 3 days of work, I then pulled off my tape and all of my project came with it. So I, again, am in the camp of putting a little elbow grease after the fact and really, really cleaning it out. But like I said, I've had way more epoxy inside my cups and I've been able to get every last bit out. And then after, so this one's not completely clean yet, but after you get everything out, run it under hot water, clean it out. I like to wait 72 hours until I do that so that I'm not damaging my outside. And then just make sure that your lid actually fits back on. So you have your project. Okay, let's go over a refresher in terms of what we just did, because I feel like that was a lot, right? So let's go over materials one last time so that we're all on the same page. I feel like I need a materials list or something so that you go to the store and make sure you have everything. So step one, you have your mug. You might need some Gooby Gone or some type of adhesive remover to get your sticker off your mug. I use Gooby Gone. It worked great. I got the sticker off. Then you'll use a paper towel and alcohol to clean it down. Next, you'll use a sponge brush. I like a large one, just like this, and a plastic container to hold your Mod Podge. You'll need Mod Podge. Pour your Mod Podge in, brush it over, use glitter, and some type of piece of paper to catch your glitter. Apply that. Next step, let it dry for at least 2 hours. Don't skimp on your dry time. This project is an investment of your time. So make sure that you put in you're doing it for the long haul. Put in the time. Let it dry for 2 hours, come back. You can use this same cup again, just put a piece of saran wrap over it to secure it. Second coat, Mod Podge, glitter again, dump your glitter back in. Let that dry overnight, at least 12 hours. Come back and you get ready to epoxy. You will need a turner or some type of hand turner to turn your tumbler at this point. I did not show you this step, so make sure if you're following the video that you add this step in. We skipped it since I only have one turner. So you're gonna add epoxy just straight over your glitter, run it out, apply it. You'll need food safe resin. Again, my favorite brand is the Art Resin brand. It's food safe and You can put your mouth on it and it won't harm you after it's cured. You'll need some type of mixing stick, some type of mixing cup, and a scale. If you don't have a scale, make sure that you get mixing cups that have actual lines on them, and then mix your epoxy. Mix it for 3 minutes, pour it on, let it set for 12 hours. Next, come back the next day, sand it down, get your automotive sandpaper. I used 180 grit automotive sandpaper. Sand it down and then rinse it off, clean again with alcohol. Then use your Cricut or some type of cutting device so that you can cut your decal and apply your decal. I used white permanent outdoor vinyl and adhesive foil. And you'll need transfer tape and masking tape and scissors to apply that if you use the hinge method. Burnish that on, apply it, good to go. Last part is what we just did. Put it on your turner. Make sure that you go through the steps of mixing again. 15 milliliters, I didn't mention this, 15 milliliters of your resin, 15 milliliters of your hardener. You can see, I don't think you can see, but it's covered in resin, but there's still probably like 5-7 milliliters in there left. So you do have extra when you mix that much, but I like to have extra just in case I touch it or smear it or mess it up somehow. Now we're on the step where it's turning. Let it stay on your turner for 6 hours before you stop the turner. I don't like to leave my turner unattended since I put it together myself and I'm not a master electrician. So I kind of like to babysit mine and watch it so nothing happens. After 6 hours, you can unplug it, but let it sit there for 6 more hours. So a full 12-hour cure time. And then after you come back, take your knife, clean off the rim, cut out the inside of your epoxy, and then I still have some work to do with cleaning this out and getting the rest of my epoxy off. Another little helpful tip that I've heard is some people actually put like their brand, their name, or their phone number and name on the bottom of their cup and then seal that in so that if somebody ever found this tumbler, they could return it to you. So I thought that was a great tip. Let's see if I missed anything. I think I've covered everything. The cost of this project, so the bottles of art resin, they're $50 for this set, but you only need 60 milliliters, 30 of each, the resin and the hardener for this project for each tumbler. So it's not that much, but you do need to buy the whole set to do this project. The tumbler itself I think was around $7, and then your vinyl, extra cost on there. So if you're making a lot of tumblers, they'll be about $10 a piece. If you're just making one, it'll be about $57. And then you have your turner cost, which cost me, now that I'm thinking about, probably less than 20 bucks. So if you plan to make a ton of tumblers, a turner is definitely the way to go for you. Imagine sitting here and having to turn this, like, not for me. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Again, my name is Carly Hall and I'm with Apartment 413. Thank you so much for spending the last hour with me, and make sure to share your tumblers. I can't wait to see what you make. Have a good one.